Hello, and welcome to IVF in Your Pocket, your waiting room companion. I'm your host, Alexandra Geary Stock. I'm a therapist in San Francisco, helping you navigate the really intense IVF journey. Let's get right into it today. We're taking a question from N and says, how on earth do you survive this nerve-wracking 2-week wait? I'd appreciate any tips. Thank you, Anne, for your question. I think, in terms of IVF, the one thing that seems to be very common and predictable for people going through the journey is that at some point they will reach the, well, let's be honest, dreaded 2-week wait. It is just a nerve-wracking experience, and a lot has led up to the moment of waiting to see if there is the outcome that is so desired. So let's talk about it. The first thing to find out is when actually you will go in for your beta draw, the blood draw. That actually is different from clinic to clinic. I talked about this in the Transfer What Your Clinic May Not Tell You episode. Unfortunately, each clinic has a different timeline for when they do a first beta draw. So it's really good to know when that date is. But most clinics have you draw your beta on day 10. So it is a long, long wait. Even though it's not a whole 2 weeks, it can feel like an eternity. So how on earth do you survive this? It's such a good question. Like, what are the tools to getting through it? The first thing that I recommend is to go into the 2-week wait with a plan and if you are doing this with a partner, get on the same page as your partner, if you can, about that plan. Some things to know and include in the plan are you going to do a home pregnancy test, or are you going to just wait to the beta? The home pregnancy test is something that you can do before the beta draw, so there's an advantage to that, and it is how people find out that they're pregnant typically who do spontaneous pregnancies, who are not doing IVF. So it's nice to think about perhaps having that experience of home pregnancy test with a result that you so desire. But then it can be also nerve-wracking to not have an exact number of the rising HCG, or to, of course, be possibly looking at a chemical pregnancy, so early on pregnancy that then doesn't sustain, and that is hard to catch on a home pregnancy test versus an actual blood draw. So there are some disadvantages to the home pregnancy test. So it's good to know where you stand before you enter this. So, and then getting clear if you are going to do a home pregnancy test, like which day you're going to test, what kind of test you're going to use. It is good to use the first urine of the day and be consistent if you're going to test throughout the later part of the 2-week wait. So that's the first thing to think about. The second thing to think about is, what are some things you're going to tell yourself to help you manage the emotional anxiety that is likely going to come up and this just really nerve-wracking experience? What are some things you can say? What are some what we call coping statements? We've talked about this in prior episodes that you can say to yourself or your partner or vice versa that can help you manage. Now, these can be very different depending on who you are. So it's really important to get an individualized kind of coping statement. But one thing that's really helpful is to remind yourself that most people who are at this stage in a pregnancy don't even know that they're pregnant. Because oftentimes people in the 2-week wait can start to feel very hypervigilant about what they're putting in their bodies, if they're doing the right thing, is this going to hurt, is this going to somehow do some damage, and it can be very anxiety provoking. And so a helpful coping statement can be, a lot of people at this stage in the journey, and the majority of people don't even know they're pregnant yet, and that can hopefully release some of the pressure and hypervigilance that you might be experiencing. Another thing that might be helpful is to tell yourself that you can do hard things. You've done so much to get to this point. You've gone through so much. You can get through whatever the outcome is with this too. So that's another one that can be really helpful. Another thing that helps people is to remind yourself what your plan is should this not be the outcome that you're hoping. So reminding yourself, and maybe you and your partner, if you have one, talking about what's the next steps if this doesn't work, and holding on to that there's a plan either way. And for some people, it actually helps to fantasize about having the outcome that they desire and fantasizing about what that might feel like. What do you plan to do when you are pregnant? What do you imagine that being like? Who might you tell? What might it feel like? So sometimes actually imagining and playing with the fantasy of it working the way you want actually is a coping in and of itself. The most important tool for surviving the 2-week wait for most people, I think most people would agree with this, is that it's essential to have a lot of distraction activity during this time, because otherwise this will go so painfully slow. So it might be on your mind a lot, that's okay, but getting some distraction activities in place beforehand is a really good idea. So maybe that includes some binge watchings of some of your favorite series right now, or some books, or both. Maybe that means you are taking a mini vacation. Maybe you're doing a lot of extra self-care, booking some massages, hanging out with friends. Especially great if you're hanging out with friends who you haven't maybe seen in a while. Anything that you can do that you can think of that helps distract is really crucial. And then the second piece to that, the piece I think that's less talked about when we discuss the 2-week wait, is that it's okay if you find yourself not being distracted. Which just sounds so obvious. I'm sure you're thinking, Alexandra, I didn't need you to tell me that. But we don't talk about that enough. We talk about, okay, it's a 2-week wait, let's get some distraction activities. But we don't talk about it's okay if this doesn't work and you find yourself preoccupied. So again, back to kind of the theme of the podcast, which is really being open and accepting to where you are at in the journey. And if you are doing this with a partner, accepting where they're at. And they may be coping very differently with this 2-week wait than you are. So that's another thing to make room for. It's okay if you've found some distraction activities and they aren't working and you find yourself preoccupied with the outcome. The other thing that is potentially helpful, though frustrating, is a reminder to yourself and your partner that this is actually not in your control. You've done so much to get here. A lot of those things have been in your control. What steps you're taking, which clinic you're doing your journey with, when you're timing your cycles, what route you're taking to build your family through IVF. But this one is not in your control. And of course, there's so much about IVF that's not in your control, but this one is especially not in your control. Like whether this sticks or not it's not in your power. And while that can feel utterly shattering, it's also could possibly be freeing, and a really important mantra to remember during this 2-week wait. That one should go right into your survival toolkit. Also important to remember is that you might be scanning a lot and extra hypervigilant, like looking for any body clues, seeing anything in your body and thinking it means one outcome or the next. And this can be really nerve-wracking. And I just want to echo and support that this is normal, this is really common, and those are also good moments to pull up your coping statements, these little mantras that you've developed to talk to yourself, and even maybe turn to something else. So that's a good moment to maybe phone a friend, get on the Calm app, do some meditation, do some yoga, do some exercise, as long as it's cleared by your RE. Anything that you can do to get your mind off the kind of hyper vigilant body scanning that can happen, and that is a normal process in this nerve-wracking 2-week wait. All right, well, thank you so much for your question, and I hope that helps. Let me know if you can follow up. Please send me an email and let me know if it helped or not. I'm happy to do another episode. There's a lot of tools here to cover. That concludes our episode for today. Thank you so much for listening. Please send me your questions. What's on your mind about IVF? What's been particularly challenging lately? I'd love to try to incorporate one in the upcoming episode. You can reach me at alexandrapsychotherapy@gmail.com or my website, alexandragarystock.com. Until then, remember, you are not alone.